Today is the 24th day of November, 2014. 88 years ago, Sri Aurobindo received the overmental, preparatory to the supramental descent. There were only about 13 people in attendance. Nolini has written a little, Purani has written a little bit about how Mother called everyone and they gathered together. But other than that, we don't have very much. And the world has no idea what Sri Aurobindo has done. So I've asked our dear friend Alok to speak today on Siddhi Day, the day of victory.
To start with, I must say that I feel a deep joy today particularly, and in some way it reminds me, maybe through an inner memory, of the joy that everyone felt during that period when the great descent, overmental descent of the overmind into the physical consciousness took place. But I wish to go about this subject in a little different way. And I feel inspired to speak today about an aspect of Sri Aurobindo which goes unnoticed, Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. We know Sri Aurobindo as a yogi, and we talk about him as a philosopher, poet, and even a revolutionary. But Sri Aurobindo the renunciate, because all yoga implies a double movement, a movement of accomplishment and a movement of renunciation. In fact, renunciation is a preparation for the next step, because until we discard what we still hold on to, we cannot get what we aspire to get. In Sri Aurobindo's life up to this great moment in 1926, we see a series of renunciation. We know how difficult his life had been in UK, in Cambridge, in Manchester, in these places, and much has been spoken and written about it. But the first renunciation at a most material level, when Sri Aurobindo renounced the ICS, which could have been a doorway to a very good career and job which most people of that age look for, and during those times it was a much more valuable thing than what we can conceive of today. And then joining the Baroda State Service. Then we see again that Sri Aurobindo renounces the Baroda State Service, the money and the position, the prestige and the fame involved with it, to plunge himself into the revolutionary freedom movement of India. Up till this, we can understand, because there were people at that time who renounced their careers, their jobs, their money, their position, for the sake of a greater movement, which at that point of time, the freedom movement of India. But then after that, we see one after another a series of inner renunciations, something which goes unnoticed because it's so inner. Sri Aurobindo had the experience of nirvana, what is normally regarded as a peak experience. There are yogis who would, after that, probably they have to do nothing else except withdraw in some part of the world, or withdraw within themselves, or maybe paradoxically preach nirvana to the world. That has also happened. Talk about that to the world and awaken everybody to the need of withdrawing from this world. But Sri Aurobindo doesn't do anything of that sort. And what is amazing is that after that, Sri Aurobindo plunges himself into activity of very different kind. He edits journals, he speaks, goes about, and during those days, Nalnida describes that there were already within him the marks of a god and a yogi, and how, with what compassion Sri Aurobindo would respond to people. Lots of people would come along when he went for his talks all over India, and they would come, they would have problems, they would have issues, and how Sri Aurobindo with utmost compassion deal with each one's difficulty, disregarding all his personal conveniences and comfort. Of course, that he was known to do even in Baroda days. And then it all culminates in the Alipur jail, in that grand experience of Vasudevam Sarvamiti, regarded by the Gita as the rarest of rare experiences that a yogin can have. And the mother, speaking of that experience, says it was an experience of supramental oneness, where he sees the one immanent divine everywhere, in the blanket, in the cup, in the bars, in the tree, in the judge, in the prosecutor, in those who were fighting on his side and those who were on the other side.
Yes.
It's an amazing experience. And one wonders what else is left after that. We talk about Buddha's renunciation, and of course it's a great renunciation. But when we really look at the heart of it, Buddha renounces worldly life because he wants to attain to a greater consciousness, spiritual life, or a greater life, or a higher life, or truer life. And that renunciation is well known. But when one has both worldly achievement, worldly success, and one has already arrived at the culmination of spiritual pursuit, then what is left? And that's where we see Sri Aurobindo's great renunciation at that point of time. Instead of becoming a worldwide guru, which he could easily have done, he withdraws. And many people couldn't understand at that point of time that what has happened. And some thought that he has escaped from the issues during the revolutionary period. And there's a famous story of Charu Chandra Dutt. I'm just digressing a little just to see the build-up of that great event. And C.C. Dutt, who was one of Sri Aurobindo's contemporary, he was one of them who didn't like at all that Sri Aurobindo has withdrawn from active politics, and he felt that he has abandoned everybody and escaped. So he burnt away a lot of letters, etc., which Sri Aurobindo had written to him, and that material, and all that he kept with him was a copy of the Gita, which Sri Aurobindo used to read and had given to him. Much later, when Sri Aurobindo is here, and Dilip Kumar Roy, who very often became a catalyst for bringing together many persons to Sri Aurobindo, he asked Sri Aurobindo, "Do you know Charu? It seems," he says, he claims that he was your, compatriot during the revolutionary days. And Sri Aurobindo says, "Oh, Charu, yes, I know him very well. He is one of those with whom I have fought the battle of the ages in many lives. But in this life, I could not call him because the work that had to be done was of a different kind." And when this was told to Charu, he was totally amazed that he used to call him chief, that he holds him in such a great esteem. And what had he been doing? So Charu's wife scolded him when she came to know that, "Look, I have been telling you that you go and seek shelter and refuge at his feet. He will give you peace and calm, which you desperately need." And Charu, still with some hesitance and resistance, because he would never bow down before anybody who was non-Indian, and the mother was French. So he writes to Sri Aurobindo that, "I would like to come there, but I have two problems. I cannot bow before a foreigner lady, and he used to smoke hookah in the pipe." And Sri Aurobindo asked Charu that, "Do you still smoke hookah?" Then he writes, "Yes, but I am not the slave of hookah. Hookah is my slave. That cigar is my slave." So anyways, he got the permission to come. And on the way, he describes how he completely got rid of this habit of smoking hookah. It never occurred to him. He never felt an impulse. And he comes, and when he has Sri Aurobindo's darshan, Sri Aurobindo asks him, "Have you seen the mother?" Now is the moment of, he just doesn't know what to say. And he says, "No, I have some back problem, and so I cannot bend and all." Sri Aurobindo says, "That's not a problem. Mother will can stand a little higher up, and you can do your pranam." And sure enough, when he saw her he could sense immediately that how silly and stupid of me that I was trying to put her in a frame of a certain nationality, of a certain language. She is beyond all frames. So he had that inner revelation and he stayed on. And during darshan days, it was Charu who was the first one allowed to go to Sri Aurobindo. I mean, they used to be sequence. So who will go first, who will go next, like that. So we see in Sri Aurobindo this great renunciation, and he explained that why he came away, because he had foreseen the lines along which India would achieve freedom. It was decided and the lines had been worked out and already released. It was an occult action. So he had to do something much greater, and that he says in one of his letters to Barin, divine man making. Because when Barin says, are you still doing man making? He says, well, I have done my bit of man making. Now I am busy doing divine man making. Then we see again Sri Aurobindo going still further. Another realization, which is the third major realization, and that is the Par-Brahman realization, of which of course nothing can be spoken, because you can speak of it as not this, neti, neti. You can equally speak of it this alone, it is iti, iti. And yet, neti and iti don't describe him. Sri Aurobindo in one of his poems, because that's the master, Sri Aurobindo, the master of the word, speaks of the unspeakable. Normally, and Sri Aurobindo himself says you cannot speak of Par-Brahman. It is beyond all definitions and descriptions. And how beautifully he puts it. He says, he is, we cannot say, nor he is not. For nothing too is a conception of himself unguessed. Both time and timelessness sink in that sea. Time becomes a wave, space a wandering drop. And it ends with this wonderful line, the Almighty One knew labor, pain and strife. This is the great miracle, that the divine becomes all this. The reverse miracle, if we may say so, and the miracle, original miracle, which opens the door for the evolution. So, we see again after this experience, Par-Brahman, of which nothing can be spoken, yet Sri Aurobindo is busy laboring for something else, something still greater. And it's quite understandable why people would have felt terribly confused at what's happening. And during that time when Sri Aurobindo saw that they just can't figure out what's happening, because all that is there in his records of yoga, so these gatherings started somewhere around, I think, 1921-22, what are now known as the evening talks. And people would put questions and Sri Aurobindo would answer. To some of them he would say, no, not yet, not now, I would talk about it later. These are a series of questions that the disciple asked on his birthday. For instance, do you think that now the moment is coming closer? He would say, well, it's a bit closer than before. Then they ask, is humanity ready? And then Sri Aurobindo says, well, there is a strong resistance in the material world, in the external world, and that resistance must be dissolved for the supermind to descend, and humanity is not ready. He makes it very clear that the supermind is descending, but it doesn't come down right into the matter and fix itself. And then in one of the places, I think it's a conversation in November 1926 itself, or maybe a little before, but it is 1926, when the disciple asked Sri Aurobindo that, sir, what are the conditions for this supramental descent and fixing itself in the earth consciousness? So he says one of them is that you have to approach it through the psychic being. Now that is something which disciples comprehend a little bit. And then they ask, sir, what are the other conditions? So Sri Aurobindo says, I can't speak about it. It's no use speaking because you won't understand. So the disciples ask him, sir, please try. We will try to understand. So Sri Aurobindo says that, beyond the self and not the Atman, there is another plane at which the individual finds his true being. What is called as the Jiva in Indian thought.
Yes.
And that is the plane of the gods, the true gods, and that plane must come down. Then only it is possible for the next step to take place. So the disciple immediately says, "Sir, I couldn't understand." And Sri Aurobindo says, "Well, I told you so." So that's how the conversation stops there. But essentially, if we really look at the Earth's evolutionary history, what has been happening till now is that evolution has taken place under the stress of the overmind, most often not directly but indirectly through the other gods and goddesses. For instance, we had at one point of time the Norse gods, who are more like titans, and many of the gods of the early humanity which are documented now, we see them very close to human conceptions, titanic conceptions even of the gods, and yet they were necessary for human beings to evolve one step, one step. And then in Indian thought, and Sri Aurobindo speaks about it, that the conception of the gods comes in its full-blown way. And he particularly speaks about the threefold trinity and about Krishna and the true gods who are the supramental gods, and they have not yet manifested upon earth, and yet the overmental gods have shaped creation till now. Now these gods are wonderful beings, and they are very nice beings, very helpful, benevolent. Mother was asked that do they harm human beings? The mother says the true gods do not harm, unless you hit against them with their nose, and then you will fall flat. At the same time, they are very different from what human beings carry. Because of the psychic presence, human beings have that sympathy, that deep love, that deep sympathy, the deep spirit of oneness with things that the gods don't have. The adoration for the supreme, the surrender to the divine, this the gods don't know. Because for them, the birth and death of a human being is nothing. It's not even a fraction of a moment. And for them, it's simply the body which is destroyed and the evolution goes on. So they don't really care much about that.
Mother calls them typal.
Typal beings. So they are typal beings. And well, titans are also typal beings. And these beings don't evolve. To evolve, they have to take human birth. So in this evolutionary history of Earth, the gods have played the role of influencing mankind to turn towards something higher, something more beautiful, something nobler. But because human beings have a psychic being, time to time we will see in the history of Earth's spiritual evolution that there are beings who have gone beyond the gods, and they talk about it. In the Upanishads they talk about it, and there is a famous story which Mother used to love and enjoy, and when the film was shown she was very amused. The story of Sati Anasuya. It's from the Indian thought, where a lady, by the power of her tapasya, and what kind of tapasya? Simply a one-pointed love towards her husband and the practice of truth. That's why she is called as the great Sati. By the practice of truth, she goes to such an extent that even the Trinity, she is able to change them into little babies. They come to test her, that whether she is really a chaste woman or not. Now, this is not so simple as, chastity is not of the body but of the mind. Nalnida speaks about it. And when they come to test her, they give a strange kind of situation that you have to make us eat food sitting in your lap, and you would be without any dress. And she has committed, and she says fine. But she has a trick up her sleeve, and she turns them into little babies, makes them sit and feeds them and says go and sleep. So now the three great goddesses suddenly realize that their husbands are no more coming back, and they come and they say that, look, we are sorry, it was we who felt that how can a human being be greater than us goddesses? And we realized that we were wrong, that human beings have something in them which takes them beyond the gods. But now our problem is about our husbands. And she tells them, well, you find out for yourself, they are all lying there. You recognize yours and take them home. Now when this film was shown, Mother was very happy. And she said the beauty of this film is that human beings can do it. They can go beyond the gods because they have a psychic being. So what was happening? The general humanity was shaped by the overmind gods. But few human beings had found a path to go beyond these gods. The great seers, the great initiates, and this secret was guarded in schools because it would upset the creation. So the rest of the humanity was still under the influence of the gods. They would worship them, and the gods would help them to grow depending on the kind of god. And this was the relation. Sometimes some gods would partially incarnate in some human beings. These stories are there in Indian thought, and they are there in everywhere in the world. But in Indian thought, it's being given a lot of prominence. For instance, in Mahabharata, at all crucial junctures, partially these gods have sent their emanations in some specific human beings. Arjuna himself, the recipient of the Gita, is supposed to have been an Ansha avatar of Indra. So that's how they would help the evolutionary march of mankind. But the problem was, one, they were influencing from above. They never directly descended into matter except for Krishna the Anandamay. And he came, took an earthly body, the supreme, that's how the mother puts it, took an earthly body, but then withdrew and stayed like the avatars. Avatars never completely withdraw. But his work was not to change matter, but to show a way to the over mind and past beyond that. He gave a very wide way, the way of works and the triple path. Not to go into that. Now the first thing was that these gods must descend and fix themselves into material creation and work there. So far they have been in their cozy homes and influencing from there. So in any case, when you pull the supermind down, they are bound to come closer. It's a pressure from above. They also feel the heat. So the mother describes so beautifully that for a few months before November 1926, there was a pressure for these gods to descend. Now, what was happening when these gods began to incarnate, people couldn't bear it. We have the famous example of Tirupati. Now, one of the four great gods whom Sri Aurobindo wanted to descend, the four guardians of the supramental world. And Tirupati, when he received that, he lost his mind. He began to believe that he is God himself and he had to be sent away. There are so many letters of Sri Aurobindo with regard to Tirupati. It is one of those stories of the dangers of yoga. And he had to be sent away from Pondicherry, and arrangements were made for him to stay in Andhra, where he lived after that throughout. And though he was in touch with Sri Aurobindo, time to time he would get the impulse to come here. But Sri Aurobindo had told very clearly that you have to stay there now. Of course, the journey doesn't stop. This is just for the sake of completion. Tirupati would come again, and the yoga is never lost. Somebody who has gone to that extent. But this became a dangerous thing, because when these gods began to incarnate, it swells the ego. And so, very interestingly, in one of the conversations, Sri Aurobindo would tell that, previously I thought it's not safe to talk to you about this plane of the gods because it would be dangerous. But now not to speak about them would be dangerous. Now, it's very interesting that why Sri Aurobindo made that remark.
Yes.
Well, previously to speak about them would have been dangerous because everybody would romanticize and fantasize, oh, I'm this god. And today so many human beings start believing that they are gods, and what happens to the ego is, legion. Stories are legion about that. It's so easy, and Mother has said the dazzles of the overmind are so dazzling that anybody can mistake them for the true divine. And she says that, Sri Aurobindo says that at one point, even for me, I felt this is it. Till he renounces that and goes further. So he would not speak about the gods because people would start believing that they have grown into that god and this god, and particularly in India there are so many stories and everybody is some god somewhere there. But later on, because these gods were descending, for instance in Nalnida, Varuna had descended. In Amrita, Brahma, the god with the word of creation. So this was happening, and not to speak about them was dangerous because people may lose their way. So Sri Aurobindo cautioned that what is necessary if you really want to contain these experiences is to, one, freedom from the ego. You have to now more than ever before work towards getting free from the ego and the desire element. Because if it mixes, the whole experience will turn towards a kind of aggrandization of the ego and will end in disaster. So he was preparing everybody because he saw what is happening. And then of course the mother, when she saw these gods coming and touching the earth, she asked them, would you like to participate in the supramental creation? Yes, mother, yes, mother. No, it's not enough for you to be up there. Would you like to incarnate, fix in matter, No mother, no mother. So beautifully she describes that they would come and sit on the ledge, all the Trimurti and all of them, but nobody would want to take a body, fix himself in a body, because it means tremendous limitation. Coming into a body is a great renunciation for the gods. So she gives the story of Shiva. He says, I will help in the work. And she describes beautifully with his gold red body and tall, touching the ceiling. And then he says, yes, I will help in the new creation. What would you want me to do? And the mother says that, I want this physical ego to go away. The ego which is inbuilt in the very cells of the body. And Shiva says, yes, I will do it for you. And she goes to Sri Aurobindo and says, I have a very funny feeling that all my cells are getting scattered. Because he is the great, destroyer, Tandava. And Sri Aurobindo says, not yet. And we know about Sri Aurobindo's power of the word, where when he would say, yes, the supermind will descend. And when he said, not yet, of course, the mother doesn't present it this way, but I was amazed, when I read this account, that immediately everything stopped. We have heard about Shiva's word, he grants a boon, but someone overruling that word, not yet. So he did not deny Shiva's boon, he postponed it in terms of time. Much later, the mother would have this experience of impersonalization of the body, and she would recollect once again and say, Shiva had granted me this, but that was not the time, and I understand it was premature. And much later it would take place. So it's one of those very fantastic stories. Yes. And during that time when Shiva said, I will help, but I will not take birth, I will incarnate when supramental creation is already there. He says, of all the gods, only Krishna consented. And she says that Krishna, an incarnation of the Supreme from the past, came and agreed, because Krishna the Anandmay, Krishna of the Kurukshetra, Krishna of the Vaishnavas, who is a delight baby, they are all different aspects of Krishna. For instance, when Sri Aurobindo received the Gita in the jail, a disciple asked him, was it the Krishna of the Kurukshetra or was it the Krishna of Vrindavan? And Sri Aurobindo said it was the Krishna of the Kurukshetra. Now here she specifies that Krishna, who was the past incarnation of the Supreme, a past formation of the incarnation of the Supreme, he comes and he says, I agree to fix myself in an earthly body to help the evolution. It's amazing. And then we see that mother says, I saw him. For a long time he was hovering around Sri Aurobindo. In fact, there are so many stories of Krishna and mother and Sri Aurobindo, just to touch upon some of them, that Sri Aurobindo would be inside and very often mother would walk in the veranda with Krishna. And she said it was such a delight, such a delight. And then when Krishna withdrew, then she would have Sri Aurobindo by his side and walk. And then one day the mother said, why do I need to do anything at all? What this ashram, this, that, nothing is needed. I am so happy just to be like this. And Sri Aurobindo, she would walk with Supreme, that's how. And then she says Sri Aurobindo knew it, and immediately the whole thing stopped. Because if that continued, why would she, we cannot understand the pain, the suffering that the incarnation has to undergo when he limits himself to a human body, plays with us. And very often I give this example when people say, what does it mean? I say very simply, just imagine that if we were given to the task of training monkeys to become computer geniuses, and not only train them, live with them, eat what they eat, give explanations for their monkey tricks, give a cogent explanation of their monkey tricks as well as about computer sciences. How frustrating the experience would be. 1 or 2 days you can amuse yourself, but not for a lifetime. But this is exactly what the avatar does. He wants to not just teach a donkey to like in a circus, they make the donkey pick up 2, then add plus, then pick up the sign of 2, write equal to and write 4. He wants a donkey to learn mathematics, higher mathematics. And the avatar does it. What else is a proof of love and compassion? Very often people ask, today also somebody was asking, what did Sri Aurobindo do for human beings? I said he did something which nobody else has done. Gave tremendous love and compassion. It's up to us to receive it. We don't understand that love and compassion. So in that love and compassion, when Krishna descended and mother went and told Sri Aurobindo, you know, I have seen this. She says, Sri Aurobindo was very indifferent to it. He said, yes, I know. But she says, because this descent had a meaning for his work and for the universal progress. Personally, he was indifferent to it. It was not that Krishna has descended into me, don't you know, you dare. Nothing. He says, it was very good because now overmind has, through Krishna, fixed itself into matter, and now the next step is possible. And then something else happened which is very amazing, and that's where we started with the great renunciation. The mother, after this, it was like all these gods entering, and people were having fantastic experiences. They were having visions, knowing about their past life, and all kinds of things were happening. Even the whole descriptions of the sadhak during that period, that there was such peace, joy in the atmosphere. Very often they would feel, to quote from Savitri, as if lifted near to the gods. And then mother goes and tells Sri Aurobindo, well, this is what I have created, and she comes to offer it to the Lord. Just as in Japan she does this, she gave the meal that I had prepared for man.
Yes.
Man refused it. Therefore I offered it to the gods, to thee, O Supreme. So she again prepared a new creation in the sense that it was very different from whatever had been done so far. It was a full-fledged overmental creation in matter, something which had never been realized. There have been touches of the overmind, influences of the overmind in few individuals. And some had gone past in secret schools. But the whole earth being under overmental influence, and a whole chunk of humanity developing into a race of overmental beings, gods, it would definitely change humanity markedly. And Sri Aurobindo says, yes, I know that. We will do great things with this.
This was the power of the word.
Power of the word. People would believe that, we will be on top of, like we'll form a great religion. You will be worshipped as the ultimate, as the supreme. But we don't want that. Nothing but the highest supramental can satisfy me. And then I see that there is nothing parallel to this renunciation.
Yes.
That both mother and mother, with her inner consciousness, within 2 hours, she says, I understood, and within 2 hours, I dissolved all that. And everybody started complaining. What happened? I had marvelous experiences, such lights, such voices, such visions. All that gone. And Sri Aurobindo, spearheading the evolutionary movement, leaves aside the Sudarshan Chakra and the flute and picks up the plough and says, now for the hard work. And we see after that the ashram came into being. Sri Aurobindo withdraws, no more evening talks. The entire charge is given to the mother. All these things happen simultaneously. And the hard work starts. Why? Because overmind can fix its conditions it demands are not so stringent. For supermind, not even an iota of darkness in any corner. It cannot take it. It will dissolve it. By take it means, then it will have only one of the two options. If supermind descends and there is falsehood, there will be catastrophe because it cannot stay. It's like light and darkness. If light meets darkness, there is no choice but to dissolve.
In Savitri, it says it might shatter all measures made, and earth sink down with the weight of the infinite.
What thou hast won is thine, but ask no more.
Yeah.
Man is too weak to bear the infinite's weight. Truth born too soon might break the imperfect earth. O soul who standest at the eternal doors, what thou hast won is thine, but ask no more. Alone thou standest at the eternal doors. Nobody is there. You see, you want to bring down. Who is there with you, accompanying you? Nobody. Nobody even understood Sri Aurobindo and the mother. And who could? I mean, how can man ever understand the divine? So this was the day when it was not just Sri Krishna's descent into the physical, which of course that's how we know it, but it meant the descent of the overmind plane and fixing itself in matter. Till now, it has only had an indirect or sometimes a direct influence, and mostly it was an influence which took into its fold few persons. And then for the rest of humanity, it was a general influence acting from behind. That's how the plane of the gods are. Even in the Vedic period, the gods had not, in some initiates, they would come and help mankind for ascent, but never fix themselves into matter. And that is why when Sri Aurobindo is asked before this descent, what are you busy with, sir? Are you pulling down the supermind? He speaks about the tail of the supermind.
Yeah.
And then he says, I know what it is. So, sir, what are you doing? I am supramentalizing the overmind. These gods have to open the passage. They have the keys. They cannot be on the wrong side. They have to completely consent. Why? Because their supramental creation would mean their hegemony, their reign also comes to an end. Now man goes beyond the gods. He does not anymore need them. And that was another big problem, that to start with, some of the great gods and goddesses, mother had to convince them. Durga, for instance, that look, do you like this kind of worship? No, no, mother, I don't like it. What to do? My devotees put me in a pandal and call me with all those drum beats, not in so many words, but it's such a misery for the gods, Poor beings have to, compress themselves. Why don't you surrender to the Supreme? Now, gods don't know it. They know they are respect of the divine. That's enough for them. But to surrender, I have to surrender. People surrender to her. So she tells Durga to surrender and she does it, and then she learns the joy of surrender. So these gods, beyond a point, will not allow. In the Vedas, there are so many stories that even there are hymns in the Veda where gods, up to a point, they help, then they begin to hinder, because they know if you go past, so only with some initiates this was kept secret. So the master had the key, and the gods would allow a certain group of humanity only as an escape, not upon earth. So on one side, they were doing very good work. On the other side, well, they would not allow a greater creation to manifest, because it would mean they are no more required. And yet people had this big problem, because human beings have been under the influence of gods. And they asked mother that what should be our relation with the gods. And she said, those who still want to worship the gods, they can continue to do so, it's their business. But they must know it has nothing to do with the supramental creation. Very categorically. So she asked, what should be our relation with them? A luminous and understanding difference. A luminous understanding that, well, they have a role to play in the creation. They are like our brothers and sisters, participating in the evolutionary march. Not as superiors and subordinates, not as the guides, not as giver of boons, because now all our boons come from the Supreme and nobody else. They are simply those who have helped so far and thus far, and they have done a wonderful job. So this was the day which opened the passage for the next level, and the work could be done. This is how on Siddhi Day. And the 2 days after Siddhi Day marked a change, as we know. The evening talk stopped. Sri Aurobindo now was sure that supermind has to descend. It was a clear indication. The overmind plane has consented. The master who had held the overmind forces in his hands, Sri Krishna, he himself entered into Sri Aurobindo's body. So then he withdrew to completely focus on this supramental descent and prepare earth for that. And the mother was given charge of the ashram, the disciples, and all over the world. she took over from Sri Aurobindo. And that was the time when Sri Aurobindo openly declared, now for everything you have to turn to her. Whatever you want to receive from me, you have to turn to her and you will receive.
And he even says, when you ask something from me,
You get only 25%. Whereas when you ask from mother, you get 100%. And it was symbolically expressed in that, they came out beautifully described that, how Sri Aurobindo came out and people were feeling something is special going on. And it was building up to a point when suddenly the mother sent call that all the disciples have to hurry back. There is something special that is going to take place. So they knew this is a culmination of something which is happening. And they all gathered for meditation or whatever Sri Aurobindo has to say. And then the door opened and Sri Aurobindo stepped out accompanied with the mother. And Sri Aurobindo sat on his royal throne, the chair, and the mother sat on his right on a stool. And there was a beautiful meditation. And then after the meditation, they had to just walk by, and the mother would bless the disciples, and Sri Aurobindo's hand would be behind her.
yes,
That as if, that was a
her
fact.
head, over her head,
Yes,
I think,
over
yes.
her hand, from behind, as if whatever his blessings were going now through the mother. They had to go only through her.
Could you just mention about Datta?
Yes, so I was just next was that.
Good.
And suddenly Datta, who felt inspired, declared, announced, oh, the Lord has come, Krishna has descended, the Lord has conquered death and death, disease, it was a great event and a lot of things he said. But she is the one who directly felt inspired. Nobody had told her anything.
Yeah.
But she's used the word that Krishna has come, the Lord has descended, he has conquered death. And we know Datta, of course we all know, but just since, we are talking about it in general. So Datta was a friend of the mother who accompanied her all the way from France. Miss Hodgson, that was her name. She was given the name of Datta. Datta means the offered one. And she's the one who stayed with mother, and beautiful lady in many ways. And she declared. And then of course many others had some kind of feeling, some kind of experiences. And after that it is the mother who was placed directly in charge of all the souls who would aspire for the supramental yoga. Sri Aurobindo was asked this question incidentally, since we spoke about the Lord has conquered death. He was asked once that is death still possible for you? Sri Aurobindo said it can come in three ways. One, by violent accident or poisoning, suddenly overwhelming. Though he had conquered poisoning, he had taken 1 kilogram of opium and it did nothing to him. So that aspect he had already conquered. So violent accident. The second was effect of age, means despite everything, matter still stubbornly refuses. And the third is my own choice. If I feel that the work cannot be done anymore, any further, it has been taken to its utmost possibility. But what he did was something which he did not mention, and that was again to renounce in my body the realization, to hasten the collective realization upon earth. And that was the reason why Sri Aurobindo withdrew. So when we look at Sri Aurobindo's life in this context, we see a series of renunciation. Renouncing the overmind creation for Mother and Sri Aurobindo meant renouncing many things. Imagine they could have formed the biggest possible religion, regarded as the most authentic spiritual figure in the history of mankind. And they let it go so simply and prepared to do the hard work. After that, you see all the sadhaks started experiencing problems of the physical consciousness, subconscious, and Sri Aurobindo would say, yes, I am myself digging deep into the subconscious, something like Rishi Agastya of old.
God's labor.
God's labor. Because unless that is cleared, this cannot. And eventually, to hasten the collective realization, he renounces realization in his own body and withdraws on 5th December 1950, the day of the great sacrifice and the day of the great victory. Depends on how we look at it. So that's the significance of 24th November. And 26th November is also known, incidentally, 26th, not 27th, as the Immortality Day. That is not often known in Sri Aurobindo circle. Amal Kiran has written a note about it. It followed the victory over death. It's an essential victory over death, because death is possible only up to the overmind level. But it's not death technically, because up till the overmind level, there is a limitation. You are not yet into the infinite. So whatever is limited can dissolve. So in Indian conception, there are two kinds of pralayas. One is a limited pralaya of the material creation. The other is a mahapralaya of the creation up to overmind. So even the gods, a point comes when they withdraw into the supreme. So up till the overmind, even the gods, beyond a certain termless time, if I may use a paradoxical term, withdraw into the supreme. But you go past overmind, there is no death, because there are no limits and it's all infinity. So November 26th, 1926 is known as the Immortality Day, and November 24th, 1926 as the Siddhi Day.